Welcome to Midnight Fatal Cases. Here, we tell the stories of real people and real tragedies, without sensationalism, without rush. Stories where a single decision, a single pause, changes everything. Tonight's case is about a holiday that was supposed to be an escape, and instead became a tragedy that never truly ended. Settle in, and listen carefully. Chapter 1, The Hook. The first call came in at 3:17. Not to the police. Not to a hotline. Not even to a friend. It went to a voicemail box that belonged to a man named Daniel Mercer, a quiet accountant from Manchester who kept his phone on silent at night because spreadsheets did not care about sleep. The message was only 12 seconds long. A breath. A thin, shaking inhale. Then a woman's voice, low and close to the microphone, like she was speaking from inside a closet. "Dan, it's me. Don't call back. Just listen. Please." A pause. A faint metallic clatter. Another breath that sounded wet as if her mouth was full of salt. "We shouldn't have stopped." Then the line went dead. By sunrise, Daniel would be standing in his kitchen in socked feet, staring at the transcript his phone app had made, reading the words again and again until they turned into something that felt unreal. His hand would keep drifting to the counter, to the small framed photo he had brought out the night before. Daniel and Clara, laughing under a cheap paper banner that said, "Bon Voyage," the picture taken in their friend's crowded living room, glasses raised, faces flushed with anticipation. Vacation photos were supposed to be bright. Simple. Proof of a life that could pause. This one would become evidence. Clara Mercer was not the kind of person who disappeared. At least that's what everyone said at first. She was 29, an elementary school music teacher. The kind of woman who kept extra granola bars in her bag for the children who forgot their lunch. The kind of woman who would leave you a voice note if she was running late, not because she thought you'd be angry, but because she didn't like the idea of you waiting and wondering. Clara did not like uncertainty. So when she vanished in the middle of a 2-week holiday, the uncertainty didn't feel like an accident. It felt like a message. The trip had started the way these trips always start, with the soft promises we make to ourselves. They had booked it in late winter, after a stretch of gray weeks that seemed to drag their bones down. A small coastal route through northern Spain, rented car, guest houses, long lunches, cliffs, and sea. 2 adults, no children, no itinerary strict enough to matter. They called it a reset. But in the days before they left, there were details that didn't fit the picture. Daniel would remember them later, when memory became a crime scene of its own. A strange email Clara received, something that made her face go flat for a second, before she smiled again. A moment at dinner where she asked, too casually, whether their rental had tracking. A quick glance over her shoulder in the airport queue, like she had felt eyes on her and was trying not to show it. Daniel had asked her gently if something was wrong. She told him she was tired. People say that all the time. Tired is a word that hides other words. On the first day of the trip, Clara posted photos. A stone archway in Bilbao, a plate of anchovies glistening with oil, Daniel's shoes at the edge of the surf, toes turned toward the water. Friends commented heart emojis. Daniel's mother replied, "Be safe. Enjoy every minute." Clara liked the comment. Nothing else. There were no photos the next day. That wasn't unusual by itself. Sometimes you forget. Sometimes you want to be present. Sometimes the battery dies. But Daniel still checked. At 20:04, he texted Clara while she was in the bathroom of a small guest house outside San Sebastian, the screen light spilling across the sheets. "Everything good?" "Signal weird," Clara replied within a minute. "All good. Driving tomorrow. Sleep soon." Daniel read it twice. It was normal. It was also blunt. No heart. No joke. No little musical note emoji she sometimes used like a signature. He told himself not to be dramatic. He turned the phone over. He closed his eyes. He fell asleep. Sometime in the early hours, he woke to the sound of rain tapping the window. Clara was not in bed. He listened for footsteps in the small room, for the rustle of a coat, for the creak of the bathroom door. Nothing. He checked the bathroom. Empty. He stepped into the hallway in his bare feet. The guest house was silent, the air smelling faintly of detergent and old wood. Downstairs, the front desk bell sat untouched. A thin light glowed behind the receptionist's window, but no one was there. Daniel went back upstairs and stared at his phone. 2 missed calls from an unknown number. 1 voicemail, 0317. He listened to the message again. 12 seconds. Her voice was unmistakable. Clara. She sounded like she was trying to stay quiet. Like she was afraid of being heard. We shouldn't have stopped. Daniel's hands began to shake, a slow tremor that made the phone feel heavier. He called back. The number was disconnected. He tried Clara's phone. Straight to voicemail. He tried the guest house landline. No answer. He ran downstairs and slammed his palm on the desk bell until it rang like an alarm. The receptionist appeared a moment later, blinking, hair mussed, still wearing sleep. Her name tag said Elena. Daniel tried to keep his voice steady. He asked if Clara had come down, if she had left, if anyone had. Elena looked confused, then worried. She said she had not seen Clara. She said the front door had a simple latch and guests could come and go. She asked if Clara might be walking. Daniel shook his head. Clara hated walking alone at night. This was not her. Within minutes, the guest house owner was awake, keys in hand, guiding Daniel outside into the wet darkness. The street was empty. Rainwater pooled in the cracks of the pavement. A lone street lamp made the world look bruised. Their rental car was not where it had been parked. For a second, Daniel's mind offered a comforting explanation. Maybe Clara had moved it. Maybe she had gone for help. Maybe this was a misunderstanding, and in 10 minutes, she would come back annoyed and damp, asking why he was outside in the cold. Then Elena found the broken key fob. It lay near the curb like a small plastic insect. The owner picked it up carefully, as if it might bite. Daniel felt a hollow space open in his chest. He could not explain what he knew in that moment, only that something had happened that could not be unwound. The police arrived just after 5 o'clock. 2 officers in dark raincoats with a patrol car that looked too clean to belong to this kind of morning. They asked the standard questions. When did you last see her? Did she argue with you? Did she drink? Was she on medication? Did she have mental health issues? Could she have left voluntarily? Daniel's answers were simple, then frantic. Number, 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 and no. They listened, faces neutral, writing things down. One of them asked to hear the voicemail. Daniel played it. Both officers looked at each other when Clara said, "Don't call back." They asked him why he had called back anyway. Daniel stared at them, disbelieving. "Because she's my wife," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. They took the key fob in an evidence bag. They searched the parking area and the alley behind the guest house. They found nothing else. And then, around 6:30, just as the sky began to lighten, Elena remembered something. A sound, she said. She had been half awake when she heard it. A car door, an engine, a brief burst of acceleration that did not match normal driving. She had dismissed it because tourists came and went. Now the memory made her face pale. Daniel asked her why she hadn't said it earlier. She swallowed, ashamed. I thought it was you." But Daniel hadn't moved. Daniel had been asleep. In the guest house room, Clara's suitcase was still open on the chair, clothes folded in neat stacks as if she had planned what to wear the next day. Her passport was on the bedside table. Her toothbrush was wet. She had not packed. She had not prepared. She had left in the middle of a routine she had started only hours before. As the morning progressed, the story began to spread the way these stories always do, first through staff whispers, then through phone calls, then through social media posts that used words like missing and please share, as if attention itself could pull someone back into existence. Daniel called their friends at home. He called Clara's sister, Hazel, who answered with a cheerful, "How's Spain?" and then went silent when Daniel said, "Clara is gone." He called the British consulate. He called local hospitals. He walked the street outside the guest house again and again, as if repetition might change what he saw. It did not. Somewhere, Clara had been awake at 3:17, close enough to a phone to leave a message, and frightened enough to beg him not to call back. She had enough air in her lungs to say a sentence. She had enough clarity to choose her words. But she did not have enough safety to stay. And the last thing she gave the person who loved her most was not a location, not a name, not even a plea for help. It was a warning. We shouldn't have stopped. The phrase clung to Daniel in a way he could not shake. Stopped where? For what? For whom? On paper it sounded small. A minor regret. In the mouth of a terrified woman, whispered at night, it sounded like an error that had opened a door. A door that, once opened, did not close again. Chapter 2. Context and People. Before the night fractured everything, Clara Mercer lived a life defined by quiet structure. She woke early, not because she had to, but because she liked the stillness before the world began asking things of her. She drank her coffee black, standing by the kitchen window, watching buses hiss to a stop at the corner. She hummed while she dressed, often the same fragment of melody, unfinished, looping back on itself. Daniel used to joke that she was always rehearsing for something. Clara would smile and say, "Music teachers never stop counting." To the outside world, her life looked small in a way that suggested safety. A modest flat, a predictable job, a marriage that appeared calm, affectionate, unremarkable in the best possible way. But context, like memory, depends on where you stand. Daniel met Clara 7 years earlier at a charity event neither of them had wanted to attend. He was there for a colleague. She was accompanying a friend who sang in the evening's program. They spoke awkwardly at first, two people unused to selling themselves, until Clara laughed at something Daniel said, and the sound surprised them both. Her laugh was unguarded. It did not ask permission. That, Daniel would later think, was the moment he fell in love. They moved slowly. Dating that felt more like a careful inspection of each other's lives than a rush toward passion. They learned each other's habits. Clara's tendency to alphabetize her spice rack. Daniel's habit of leaving cabinet doors open. They argued rarely, and when they did, it was quiet, contained, more about tone than content. They married on a cloudy afternoon with fewer than 40 guests. No dramatic vows. No fireworks. Just a promise delivered evenly, as if reliability itself were a form of romance. Clara kept in touch with her family, though kept in touch meant brief calls and long gaps. Her sister Hazel lived 2 hours away and described Clara as private but not secretive. That distinction would matter later. At the school where Clara worked, she was known as dependable. She did not gossip. She did not overshare. She was the teacher other teachers asked to watch their class for 5 minutes because they knew nothing would go wrong. Children trusted her. That trust was earned slowly through repetition, through rules that did not change, through a voice that rarely rose. On the surface, there was nothing about Clara Mercer that suggested she would become the subject of police briefings and missing person posters. But context is not only what is visible. 3 months before the trip, Clara had received an email that did not come from anyone Daniel recognized. The subject line was blank. The sender address was a string of letters and numbers. Daniel had noticed her reaction only because it was so brief. She read it. Froze. Closed the laptop. "What was that?" he asked. "Spam," she said too quickly. "Probably." Daniel did not push. He trusted her. He also trusted the world to follow its own patterns. The emails continued. Clara never showed them to him. But Daniel noticed changes. Small ones. A phone turned face down more often. Curtains drawn earlier in the evening. A habit of checking the lock twice before bed. Once in late March, Daniel woke to find Clara sitting upright, her phone glowing in her hand, her face drained of color. "Bad dream?" he asked. She nodded. She did not say more. Later, when Daniel would give his statement, an officer would ask him why he had not insisted on knowing more. Daniel would struggle to answer without sounding foolish. Because how do you explain that nothing seemed urgent enough to demand a confrontation? Because how do you justify trusting the person you love not to lie about danger? Clara had always been the cautious one. She avoided confrontation. She planned ahead. She saved receipts. If something were truly wrong, Daniel believed, she would tell him. The holiday was meant to interrupt the quiet tension that had crept into their routines. Clara suggested at first, one evening over dinner, her fork tracing patterns in sauce. "Let's go somewhere that doesn't know us," she said. Daniel laughed. "Everywhere doesn't know us." She shook her head. "Somewhere we won't run into anyone. Somewhere neutral. They chose northern Spain almost at random. It felt safe, scenic, boring in the right way." In the weeks before they left, Clara seemed lighter, more present. She planned outfits. She bookmarked restaurants. She talked about cliffs and wind, and how the sea always made her feel small in a comforting way. Daniel took this as proof that whatever had been bothering her was passing. He did not know that Clara had quietly increased her privacy settings online, that she had changed passwords, that she had deleted old accounts. He did not know that she had asked a colleague, casually, if she believed people could be tracked through rental cars. The colleague laughed. "Who do you think you are? A spy?" Clara smiled along with her. On the day they left, Hazel called to wish them well. "Send pictures," she said. "Real ones. Not just food." Clara promised she would. At the airport, Daniel noticed Clara watching the departure board more than she needed to. Not anxious, focused. When their flight was delayed by 40 minutes, Clara exhaled sharply. "Everything okay?" Daniel asked. "Yeah," she said. "I just hate waiting." The truth was more complicated. Waiting meant time. Time meant space for things to catch up. The first 2 days of the trip passed without incident. They drove coastal roads. They ate slowly. They slept deeply. Clara relaxed, or at least appeared to. She laughed more easily. She took photos again. But there were moments Daniel could not place until later. At a small market, Clara stiffened when a man brushed past her. At a cafe, she chose a seat with her back to the wall. At a scenic overlook, she scanned the parking area before getting out of the car. Daniel noticed, but interpreted it through the lens of his own assumptions. He thought she was tired, overstimulated, perhaps simply more alert in unfamiliar places. He did not know that Clara had recognized someone at the gas station restroom. Not a friend, not an acquaintance. A face from a part of her life she had never fully explained. Years earlier, before she met Daniel, Clara had spent a brief period volunteering with a private arts outreach program. It was poorly regulated, poorly documented. It brought her into contact with people who lived chaotic, unstable lives. One of them had been persistent. Too persistent. Clara had ended her involvement and walked away without drama, believing distance was enough. She had been wrong. The emails began shortly after that program dissolved. Short messages, vague references, a tone that suggested familiarity where none was welcome. At first, Clara ignored them. Then they mentioned places she had been, times she had left work, details that were not public. She considered going to the police, then reconsidered. There was nothing concrete, no threats, just the creeping sense of being observed. She told herself she was imagining patterns. On the trip, when she saw the man at the gas station, her first instinct was denial. Then he looked at her and smiled. He did not approach. He did not speak. He did not need to. The message was clear. "You cannot outrun me," Clara did not tell Daniel. Not because she didn't trust him, because she believed she could manage it. She believed that if they did not linger, if they did not engage, the world would slide back into normal. When she squeezed Daniel's hand and said, "Let's not linger," she was already calculating distances, exits, options. That night at the guest house, she lay awake listening to Daniel breathe. Her phone vibrated once. A new message. "Still traveling," it read. "Careful where you stop." She did not reply. At some point, she left the bed quietly. She took her phone. She did not take her bag. She believed, perhaps, that stepping outside would de-escalate the situation. That talking would end it. That drawing attention would be worse. People like Clara often believe this. Because escalation feels impolite. Because danger does not always announce itself with noise. At 3:17, when she left the voicemail, she was still thinking in terms of mistakes and corrections. We shouldn't have stopped. It was not a confession. It was an analysis. A teacher's habit. She believed that if she identified the error, the lesson might still be learned. She did not yet know how final the night would become. Back home, as Daniel paced the guest house floor, Hazel sat on her sofa staring at her phone, replaying their last conversation. Clara had sounded happy. Normal. That was the word Hazel kept using when the police called her later. She sounded normal. Normal, it turns out, is not a guarantee. It is a surface. And beneath it, things can move quietly, patiently, waiting for the moment when a simple decision, where to stop, where to sleep, whom to trust, becomes irreversible. The Sauder, Chapter 3. Escalation. The escalation did not arrive as a single moment. It unfolded the way pressure does, invisibly at first, building behind ordinary actions until something finally gave way. By the second day after Clara disappeared, the investigation had acquired a rhythm. Police cars came and went from the guest house. Officers spoke in low voices. Daniel answered the same questions repeatedly, his responses flattening with each retelling, as if repetition could sand away the panic. It could not. The local police treated the case cautiously. No signs of a struggle at the guest house. No witnesses who could place Clara with certainty after midnight. No immediate evidence of a crime. The missing rental car complicated everything. Without it, there was no obvious crime scene beyond absence itself. Daniel was asked again if Clara might have left voluntarily. Again, he said no. Again, the word hung in the air between him and the officers, heavy with implication. Voluntary disappearance was a phrase Daniel hated. It suggested choice, intent, planning. Nothing about Clara's disappearance fit that. She had left her passport, her money, her luggage. She had left a voicemail that sounded like fear wrapped in restraint. And yet, from the outside, those details were still just details. By the third day, search teams expanded outward. Roads were checked. Nearby towns were alerted. A description of Clara was circulated quietly, then less quietly. Daniel watched her face become a thumbnail on screens. Hazel flew out that afternoon, her eyes red, her movements sharp with a kind of focused panic Daniel had never seen in her before. They embraced in the guest house hallway, holding each other like survivors of the same shipwreck. "I should have known," Hazel said into his shoulder. "She would have told me." Daniel did not know what to say, because part of him believed the same thing. The police asked Hazel about Clara's past. Old relationships. Conflicts. Anything unusual? Hazel struggled to answer. Clara had always compartmentalized. She shared selectively, not because she was deceptive, but because she believed some things were better left unfinished. She never liked dragging old things around, Hazel said. She believed in clean breaks. The phrase caught the attention of one of the detectives. Clean breaks rarely stay clean, he thought, but did not say. On the fourth day, the rental company called. The car had been detected crossing a toll point nearly 80 kilometers east, just after 4 a.m. on the night Clara disappeared. It was moving fast, too fast for sightseeing. The police obtained camera footage. The image was grainy. The windshield glare obscured the driver's face, but the shape behind the wheel did not look like Clara. Daniel stared at the still frame until his vision blurred. Someone else had been driving. That meant Clara had not simply taken the car and gone. That meant she had been displaced. The police shifted their language. Now they spoke of persons of interest. Now they spoke of potential foul play. They asked Daniel again about enemies. Daniel thought of the emails. He told them everything. The blank subject lines. The anonymous sender. The messages that hinted at proximity. The police asked why he had not reported them earlier. Daniel said what Clara would have said. They weren't explicit. They didn't threaten, the detective nodded. He had heard this before. By the fifth day, they traced the car to a rural area near an abandoned quarry road. It had been abandoned, locked, clean. Too clean. The interior showed no obvious signs of a struggle. No blood. No torn fabric. No fingerprints that could be easily lifted. The key fob was missing. Daniel stood a short distance away while technicians worked, the smell of dust and oil heavy in the air. He expected to feel something when he saw the car. Relief, dread, recognition. Instead, he felt only a numb certainty. This was not an accident. The quarry itself was searched. Dogs followed trails that went nowhere. The ground was unforgiving, rocky, scrubby. Clara was not there. But something else was. Near the edge of the road, partially hidden beneath brush, an officer found Clara's phone. The screen was cracked. The battery was dead. Daniel was not allowed to touch it. Hazel watched his face when they told him. She would later say that was the moment she stopped believing in happy endings. The phone, once processed, offered fragments. The voicemail Daniel had already heard. The message from earlier that night. Still traveling. Careful where you stop. The sender was the same anonymous address. The police traced it as far as they could. Disposable accounts. Public networks. Intentional obfuscation. Someone who knew how to disappear digitally. The escalation was no longer theoretical. It had shape. A person. A pattern. The police began looking backward. They reconstructed Clara's movements over the past year. They subpoenaed records. They reviewed security footage near her workplace. They found nothing dramatic, which in its own way was worse, because it suggested patience. On the 7th day, Daniel received another voicemail. This one was not from Clara. The number was blocked. The voice was male. Calm. Unhurried. You should have listened, it said. She tried to do the right thing. Then the line disconnected. Daniel played the message for the police, his hands steady in a way that frightened Hazel. This was escalation made audible. A voice stepping into the open. The police classified the call as taunting, an attempt to exert control. They told Daniel not to answer unknown numbers, as if choice were still available. Media attention increased. Headlines used words like mystery and vanished. Commentators speculated about voluntary disappearance, secret lives, dramatic revelations. Hazel stopped reading. Daniel could not stop. Each theory felt like an accusation. At night, he replayed Clara's voicemail in his head, the breath before the words, the way she said his name. She had been careful. That detail haunted him. Careful people do not disappear by accident. Careful people are targeted because they hesitate. The escalation, when viewed from the outside, looked like a sequence of events. From the inside, it felt like a narrowing. Options collapsing. By the 10th day, the police believed Clara had been intercepted deliberately. They believed the stop at the gas station had been the moment of identification. They believed the encounter at the guest house had been planned. But belief was not proof. And proof remained elusive. Daniel began to understand something about escalation that no one teaches. It does not always look like chaos. Sometimes it looks like order tightening its grip. And somewhere between a warning and a disappearance, the space for rescue disappears too. The Prior, Chapter 4. The turning point. The turning point was not violent. There was no explosion of sound. No chase. No moment that could be isolated and labeled as the instant everything changed. Instead, it was a decision made quietly, under the belief that restraint could still control the outcome. Investigators would later agree on this much. Clara Mercer did not intend to disappear that night. She intended to end something. By the time the case reached its second week, the working theory had solidified. The man who had been sending the messages had followed Clara for longer than anyone initially understood. Not constantly, not openly, but often enough to know her routines, her habits, her tendency to avoid conflict. The kind of person who waits does not need to rush. Phone data from Clara's device, recovered in fragments, showed she had searched for phrases like persistent contact harassment and when to report unwanted messages months before the trip. She had closed the pages quickly. She had not bookmarked them. She had been gathering information without committing to action. That fit her personality. Clara believed problems could be reduced if approached correctly, calmly, privately. The night she left the guest house, she believed she could contain the situation by removing Daniel from it. Her voicemail made that clear. Don't call back. Just listen. She was not asking for rescue. She was asking for compliance. Investigators believed the man contacted her again after midnight. That he indicated he was nearby. That he implied, without stating, that escalation would occur if she did not respond. The threat was not explicit. It did not have to be. People who rely on fear understand suggestion better than force. Clara left the room with her phone and little else. No coat. No bag. She did not wake Daniel. This detail mattered. It meant she expected to return. Security footage from a nearby road camera captured a figure matching Clara's height and build stepping into the rain at 3:05. She paused near the curb. She appeared to hesitate. Then another figure entered the frame. The footage quality was poor. Faces were indistinct, but the body language was clear. Clara did not run. She turned toward the person. The two stood close, too close for strangers. They spoke briefly. No sound, no visible struggle. At 3:14, a car door opened. At 3:17, Clara left the voicemail. At 3:18, the car drove away. This was the turning point. Not because it was dramatic, but because it represented the final moment Clara believed cooperation could prevent harm. Psychologists who later reviewed the case described it as a classic miscalculation. People who avoid confrontation often overestimate the power of reason in situations defined by obsession. They assume there is a script that can be followed to resolution. Clara likely believed that acknowledging the man, speaking to him directly, would end the pursuit. That drawing him away from Daniel and into a controlled interaction would de-escalate the risk. She had been wrong before. She was wrong again. The car's route suggested intention. It did not head toward a police station. It did not circle. It moved decisively east, away from populated areas. At some point during that drive, something changed. Investigators believed Clara realized then that the rules she was playing by were not shared. Evidence suggested her phone was damaged while the car was still moving. The crack pattern on the screen implied impact rather than a drop. A sudden attempt to signal. A sudden attempt to reclaim control. It did not work. What happened next was reconstructed only partially. The car stopped near the quarry road. The location was isolated but accessible, close enough to the main road to feel safe, far enough to avoid witnesses. Clara's phone was discarded there. The car continued without her. This was the irreversible moment, not because of what was done, but because of what was no longer possible. Once the car left that place, Clara's options collapsed completely. Investigators believed she was taken on foot from there. How far they could not determine. The terrain offered too many variables. Wind erased tracks. Rain flattened evidence. Search teams found nothing definitive. But absence itself became a form of information. Hazel struggled with this phase more than Daniel. Daniel lived in a suspended state focused on procedure. Calls, meetings, statements. Hazel lived in the details. She imagined Clara cold, frightened, regretting silence. The guilt attached itself to her in unexpected ways. "She didn't want to worry us," Hazel said to an officer once. "She always thought she could handle things." The officer did not contradict her, because it was true. The turning point in cases like this often occurs when restraint meets fixation. When one party believes there are boundaries, and the other does not. By the third week, the investigation shifted again. The police identified a suspect, a man in his late 30s. History of boundary violations. No convictions that would have raised immediate alarms. A pattern of fixations that ended only when the object disappeared. He had traveled through northern Spain around the same time. He denied knowing Clara. His digital trail was thin but not non-existent. Too thin to be accidental. He was questioned, released, monitored. There was not enough to hold him. For Daniel, this was another turning point. The idea that the person responsible could walk freely while Clara remained missing altered something fundamental. He stopped asking when she would come home. He began asking how people lived with not knowing. Clara's voicemail took on new weight. It was no longer a warning. It was a boundary marker. The last moment before choice vanished. The turning point in this story is not marked by violence caught on camera or a confession extracted under pressure. It is marked by a woman stepping into the rain, believing that calm could still protect the people she loved. And by the realization, too late, that some dangers interpret calm as permission. Brasser, Chapter 5, Fallout and Discovery. The fallout did not arrive with answers. It arrived with weight. By the fourth week, the investigation had consumed the shape of everyone's days. Daniel no longer measured time in hours, but in phone calls. Hazel measured it in sleepless nights and half-finished cups of tea. The police measured it in missed opportunities and narrowing margins. The suspect remained just out of reach. He complied with questioning. He provided alibis that were incomplete, but not provably false. He traveled frequently, always just enough to blur timelines without crossing legal thresholds. He did not confess. He did not need to. Cases like this do not hinge on confession. They hinge on accumulation. And accumulation is slow. The media attention began to shift in tone. Early sympathy gave way to speculation. Commentators dissected Clara's past, searching for reasons that could explain the inexplicable. Articles suggested hidden relationships, double lives, impulsive decisions. Daniel stopped reading entirely. Hazel tried once to correct a reporter and ended the call shaking. There was no triumph in any of it. Only erosion. The police expanded their search area. They brought in additional teams. They followed every lead, even the weak ones, because weak leads were all they had. Weeks passed. Then quietly, something changed. A hiker came forward. He had been walking a lesser-used trail not far from the quarry road. He had not reported anything earlier because he had not understood its significance. He had seen a scarf, light-colored, caught on brush, out of place. Search teams returned to the area with renewed focus. The terrain was difficult. Visibility was poor. They found the scarf. It belonged to Clara. The discovery did not bring relief. It brought gravity. The search intensified again, but this time with a different understanding. The language used by investigators shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, from hopeful to careful. They were no longer searching for a missing person. They were searching for remains. Daniel was informed in a small room with a window that looked out onto nothing in particular. The officer's voice was steady, professional. Hazel cried openly. Daniel did not. He stared at his hands and thought of Clara folding clothes on the chair, planning for a morning she never reached. More items were found over the following days. A shoe, a fragment of fabric. Each discovery tightened the circle. And then, finally, they found her. The location was not dramatic, not hidden in some elaborate way, just far enough from the road to avoid casual discovery. Time had done what it always does. Clara Mercer was identified through dental records. The official cause of death was listed cautiously. Exposure, trauma consistent with restraint. The exact sequence could not be determined. There were no signs of prolonged suffering. That detail mattered to Daniel more than he wanted to admit. The suspect was arrested 2 days later. This time there was enough. Digital traces, witness overlap, a timeline that could no longer be explained away. He maintained his innocence. He always would. The trial, when it came, was quiet in the way only serious things are quiet. No spectacle. No revelations that changed the narrative. Just facts assembled piece by piece. Clara's voicemail was played in court. The room held its breath for 12 seconds. Daniel did not watch the jury. He listened to her voice. The man was convicted. The sentence was long. It did not feel like justice. It felt like administration. Afterward, people asked Daniel how he felt. He did not know how to answer, because the fallout was not something that ended with a verdict. It continued in small ways. An empty side of the bed, a phone that never rang, a sentence that replayed in his mind whenever he stopped moving. We shouldn't have stopped. The phrase no longer sounded like analysis. It sounded like grief searching for logic. Chapter 6. The ending. The ending did not arrive with closure. It arrived with silence. After the trial, after the sentence was read and recorded and filed away, Daniel returned to a flat that no longer felt like a place where time moved forward. It felt preserved, as if Clara might walk back in at any moment and ask why the mail was stacked so neatly, why the air felt unused. He did not change much at first. People often expect grief to rearrange a life immediately. New habits, new routines, dramatic gestures. Daniel did none of that. He woke at the same hour. He went to work. He answered emails with the same careful politeness. He cooked meals for one and stored the leftovers out of habit, not expectation. Hazel visited often. At first every week, then every month. They spoke about Clara in fragments. A story about a student who learned to sing on key because Clara refused to give up on him. A memory of Clara insisting on walking the long way home because the light is better. They avoided the night, avoided the voicemail. avoided the question that hovered behind every conversation. What if? What if Clara had told someone earlier? What if Daniel had pushed harder? What if they had not stopped? The human mind searches for alternate versions because it cannot tolerate the idea that the outcome was not negotiable. Over time, Daniel began to understand something that did not bring comfort, but brought clarity. Clara had done what she believed was safest. She had acted according to her nature. That nature had been shaped by years of learning that calm solved problems, that escalation was a failure, that drawing attention made things worse. Those beliefs had served her well, until they didn't. Daniel listened to the voicemail one last time before deleting it from his phone. He did not do it in a moment of strength. He did it because he realized the message was no longer information. It was an echo, and echoes do not change. Hazel found her own ending elsewhere. She began speaking to small groups about personal safety, about the difference between politeness and protection. She never mentioned Clara by name unless asked. When she did, she spoke evenly. She thought being careful was enough, Hazel would say. Sometimes careful isn't the same as safe. The phrase stayed with people. That mattered to Hazel. The suspect never explained himself. He never offered a narrative that could be examined or dismantled. He maintained distance even in confinement, refusing to give the story a shape that might make sense. Perhaps that was fitting. Some actions do not come with explanations that satisfy. They come only with consequences. Years later, the guest house outside San Sebastian still operates. New paint. New owners. Tourists sleep in the room where Daniel once woke to absence. They do not know. They are not supposed to. The quarry road remains quiet. The gas station still sells water and coffee and restroom keys that hang behind the counter. Life continues because it must. Daniel eventually moved. Not far. Just enough to let the light fall differently through the windows. He kept one photo of Clara on the shelf, the one under the Bon Voyage banner. He did not frame it again. He left it as it was. A moment before departure. A moment before the world narrowed. In the end, the story of Clara Mercer is not a mystery that resolves cleanly. It is a reminder. That danger does not always announce itself. That restraint can be misread. That silence, when chosen to protect others, can isolate the one who keeps it. The tragedy was not that a vacation ended badly. It was that a woman believed she could manage a threat alone, and the world allowed that belief to stand unchallenged. There is no final lesson delivered with certainty. Only the quiet discomfort of knowing that the line between ordinary life and irreversible loss is thinner than we want to admit. And that sometimes the warning comes softly, not as a scream, but as a sentence whispered into a phone at 3:17 in the morning. We shouldn't have stopped. Thank you for staying with this story until the end. Cases like this don't offer easy answers, only questions that stay with us. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told carefully and responsibly, consider subscribing to Midnight Fatal Cases. And if this case affected you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about this story? And the moment everything changed? Until next time, stay aware.